was trying to get a slurp of tea in there before. Oh, gone.
No, you're good.
Hey, well, welcome back, everybody. Hope you're having a good week. This is one of our weekly bite-sized webinars. The sun's been shining again, so long may it continue for the weekend. You will see we've got two of the usual characters on the panel. That'll be myself and Carl Horton. And we are absolutely thrilled to say that we are joined by Pearse this evening. Pearse, thank you for your time. Who is a business psychologist stroke business consultant, and this evening he's going to give us some insight of a day in the life of Pearse. So Pearse, if it's okay, I'd like to pass straight over to you. If you can give us some insight to what you do, then we'd be grateful. Okay, thank you. I'll see what I can do. Sometimes I struggle myself to have insights into what I do. But interesting, you used the two you asked me earlier on, and business cycle. What was the job title that I like to use or would be known by? And actually, I've got about 10 different job titles because it really depends on what I'm doing and who I'm doing it with. So I'm a business psychologist, I'm a business consultant, I'm a trainer, I'm a facilitator, I'm a coach, I'm a mentor, and the list goes on, really depending on what it is that I'm doing. And that has changed enormously in the last, 6 months now, since March.
Yeah.
Prior to that, my world was, I run leadership training programs. It would be a large chunk of my world in the current world. Up until March, actually, we're running leadership programs and coaching at a senior level within organizations. So I run a program. For example, one client I was working with, and I would work with a handful of clients. So one that I was working with up until lockdown was a client that I've been working with for 2 years. So I was taking their senior team through a leadership program of personal development, in order that they could be the best they possibly could be, and they could develop new behaviors to lead their organization through to where they wanted to go to. So that's really kind of in a nutshell what I was doing with them. Then came March, and the world changed for everybody, and including my world. And actually, it was I don't know whether you felt this or not, but it was the most amazing leveler in that every single person in the world was experiencing the same issues, challenges, fears, anxieties, confusion, all of those things all around the globe. And that was to me the most amazing shared moment I think we'll probably ever have in our lives, and one that I wouldn't want to ever have again, let me tell you, because it was just shocking for us all. But what it did do was it stopped my world for a little while in terms of some of the programs that were running just went down the pecking order. What people were trying to do was to survive through what was really a difficult time. And what I've been doing over recent years, I do a lot of work into the neuroscience of behavior and understanding why we behave the way we behave at certain times. And in particular, I've been running programs on how to be more resilient and how to increase our sense of well-being through what we can do and how we can do it. And how we can manage the fear that we sometimes feel about the world and the work that we might be doing or the responsibilities that we have. So when lockdown came down and COVID came along, suddenly our levels of fear went through the roof. And so for the first 8 weeks, I didn't draw breath, because what I was doing was supporting the people that I knew and the organizations that I knew by doing. I did podcasts, webinars, I did short training sessions, I did coaching, and a lot of it wasn't paid. It was just because that was what we had to do to get through. And people were being furloughed. We hadn't even heard of the word furlough before.
No, I know. Yeah.
And so therefore people are going out and being at home. So a day in the life was that there was no such thing as a constant same day at that time. It was constantly saying, what can we do to help? What can we do to support? I could go on. I'm aware that I could just talk at this level because I'm aware that I don't know where to stop.
Carry on.
No, it's fine. Please do. Carry on.
And so there's a couple of, I've got a handful of clients I've worked with in recent years. I said I would usually work with, in any one year, I would have a handful of clients. I have a team of people that I draw in to work with me, but generally I work by myself or with clients in a one supply basis. So, but those clients were all in a position where they weren't really knowing what to do or how to do it. So one of the first videos that I shot was to talk about what happens when we are in a fearful situation, and what happens to our brains and what our bodies do and what our thinking processes happens to our thinking processes. And I probably have to ask you a question. Does this ring a bell, or have you heard of anybody doing this? You know, at very early lockdown, did you go into a supermarket? Did you dare to go into a supermarket and brave a supermarket and not remember what you'd gone in for? Or did you come out with something that you hadn't intended to buy?
Yes.
Or does that ring any, Carl?
Yeah. It does with me, 100%.
Okay.
But that might be common. but certainly, I was quite comfortable going into the supermarkets.
Yeah.
It was almost like an escape.
Yeah.
But then I'd be going, well, you know, what is it that I'm actually getting, and coming home with certainly lots of chocolate.
Yeah.
But a lot of stuff, things that I've never brought before.
Well, the shopping is an interesting one, and there might be other examples that come to your mind as well. And you're trying to work and you couldn't think straight, or you couldn't get the solution that you normally would think of quite easily. And you're kind of going, my brain's fuddled at the moment. I have no idea why I've just said that or done it. I did a video earlier on to explain why our thinking brain was disengaged. So, and it's called the amygdala hijack, or it's called flipping your lid. And it's our primal brain that's there to protect us. So our primal brain is there, and it's there to spot danger, to protect us at any time. So we can fight or fight. We can run like we've never run before, or we can fight like we've never fought before. Or if it's overloaded, we freeze. And what happens is at the back of our brain which is our monkey brain, our primal brain, is the one that's there to protect us. The front part of our brain, which is our more recent brain, our more developed brain, is disengaged. And because all our energy has gone in to protect ourselves. And you walk into the supermarket, somebody comes too close to you, this was in the early days, and suddenly you go, oh! And you go, my mind goes blank, and it's just flip it. So if your brain is this bit, and this is your amygdala here at the back, this is your spinal cord, you just flip your lid and you disengage it. And this, I did a video in that very early days, and I had so many people come back saying, it lets me off the hook. I now know why I'm feeling like this. And then what led to that was some coping mechanisms that they could do to re-engage the brain, and how by breathing would bring it back under control, by keep getting a routine would bring it back under control, some repetitive behaviors would bring it back under control to bring your heart rate back down again. So they were the sort of things that I was asked to do very early on that seemed to kind of find a level very quickly. And then we just have carried on from there.
And would you say with the people that you've been working with, Pearse, so I know you say you have a handful of people, so this would have been prior to lockdown. Yeah. So some of these people were the ones you were still working with, but were you being contacted from other areas and people that have used you before?
Yeah, I was involved I've been involved in some company seminars where I've come on to talk a bit like this, and I've been asked questions a bit like this. So saying, and so questions would be prompted by what was going on in the world at that time, and it was to help to give coping mechanisms to anybody that may have found it difficult. And I think that's what the leveler I was talking about earlier on. There was some level that every single person, no matter how old, how experienced, how senior, how achieved you be, who were having some level of anxiety or fear. So it was tapping in really, it was actually a moment in history which, for me, my work has always been about us learning about ourselves and developing new behaviors to be the best we can, primarily in the work environment. But the skills that people learn in the training room are things that are transferable to the greater life and to our outside life. Of course they are. It's about interacting, good communication skills, etc. So the idea was that I would talk to. I just lost my train of thought.
That's all right.
I just completely lost my head.
It's the fear of Kate asking you.
I know. My brain was going, and I've just completely lost that one. Sorry, Carl. Can you answer that bit?
No, it's absolutely fine. No,
There is
no,
something
don't
else.
worry.
Oh, Carl, have you froze? Is he back?
No, I'm still here.
He's back.
No.
Pearse,
Yeah,
there is something I want to say actually. With that was in the current time, if you like, or right at the beginning of COVID, and obviously through.
Yeah.
Now, I spoke to somebody last week, funny enough, and they've been through lockdown. They've been shielding, and they actually said something that we're all going to go, oh yeah, of course. But I don't think a lot of people have realised this person is an extremely independent person, always has been. And they are now frightened of their own shadow because they've had to shield. They've had, limited access to people socially, etc., etc. So for you, if there's people around that are frightened of their own shadow coming out of COVID, and I'm not saying that we are, but at that time, you're still going to be in great demand, I would imagine, for coping mechanisms coming out of COVID.
That's an interesting point. I've heard, I've come across this as a challenge for people who have been completely isolating, and it's nearly. I can think about is how do you gradually re-engage, because to go back at the level that you came out at, it may be well impossible. So, and it is about how do you. So, therefore, if you're frightened of your own shadows, it's a gradual desensitization that's required there, really. So, if you're frightened of your shadow, well, that maybe the task is just to go to your front gate.
Bite-sized pieces.
And you do that, and then the next day you go to the lamppost and back again. And then in conjunction with that, it's about the power of positive psychology, which is saying, I did that well. Rather than what I haven't done is I got to the front door today. I got to the front door today. And even to keep a record of it. Now, it's very interesting about making records is that it not only does it keep a record and you can look back on it, but by writing that something you've done well, you relive doing it to a certain extent as well. So the endorphins that are released you release them to a lesser extent, but you will tap into that same joy that you had by going to the front door.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is about setting a program. It's really saying it's a bit like going to the gym and saying, I want to be able to lift 80 kilograms by the end of this week. Well, that's totally impossible, probably, to go from 0 to 80. So setting a program in place, I want to be able to go out and walk around the park in 8 weeks' time, and then setting a process and a strategy in order to do that. So the coaching that goes on, it's interesting. There's a level of coaching then that needs to be done as well. And I have to say something as well. It's not that there's a sense, I think, there's a sense of think, oh, this is a mental illness that I have, or then I've got some. It is a process. The lockdown was brutal, and the air was brutal. So to re-engage this part of our brain, which I was saying, may take a little bit. It may be somewhat engaged, but it may not be totally engaged.
Yeah.
So we're doing it very gradually.
Do you think that because we are sort of coming into potentially another lockdown situation, that you're aware of kind of an increase in the fear again with some of the clients that you're working with and some of the people that you're working with? I mean, I certainly, when you kind of hear that potentially we might be going into a lockdown situation, I immediately have a reaction to that, and I think, I hope not. And I immediately start thinking, right, okay, what's going to happen? And then I kind of, like you said, the flip happens, and then I sort of re-engage again and go, actually, let's be sensible about this. We've already got protocols and processes. We've already been through, hopefully, the worst of what's going to happen, that brutal sudden lockdown, the unfortunate things that happen to a lot of people, and we hit that big peak, and we're not going to get to that stage again. So suddenly you start to rationalize things again, but all of a sudden, quickly, though, that little animal instinct, prehistoric brain, whatever you call it, kicks in, and managing that. So have you noticed kind of these little roller coaster episodes within the work that you're doing, that you get this kind of, these sort of ups and downs?
I think it's interesting, actually, because I remember at one stage having conversations, and I remember there was 1 week in particular, and it seemed to be everybody I was talking to was going through the same dip. It just seemed extraordinary that everybody was, without prompting, was saying, "Oh, I find this week tough," or "This is." So I think there is that roller coaster.
Yeah.
I think that this one's going to be an interesting one because we have an idea what to expect, whereas before we didn't have an idea what to expect. So it was all, we had no idea. We didn't know that there were various strains of COVID. We didn't know we thought it was all deadly. We just didn't have the research and the information or the knowledge. To re-engage your brain again is a very conscious behavior and a conscious action. And it is a phrase that I would use is it's about how can I respond and not react. If I know I'm going into lockdown again, I can throw my bricks out of my pram. I can go and screaming at dabs, if you like, and I can have a real rant. There's nothing wrong with a bit of a rant, and have a rant, get it out of your system. But it's then thinking, right, how do I do something about this? And how do I make plans to be able to get through this? So we now, who knew about Zoom? I never I'd never heard of Zoom before March 1st. I used it, and I go, "Oh, I'm now a Zoom expert. Love Zoom." I thought, "Who wants a telephone call?" "No, I want to see you." "No."
Yeah.
So I think that if we have a certain, it's interesting. What can I do to get through this, knowing that we will come out the other side again? So that's one thing we do know. So I talked about positive psychology. The power of positive psychology is amazing. We can create neural pathways by thinking in a positive way. So when a negative thought comes in, how can I turn that? How can I make it into a positive mark? And Kate, I'm just thinking also about the person that was stuck inside and thinking, "Gosh, I'm going to be locked in again. I've just started to get to the front gate," and how it is that they can actually think, what can they do rather than what they can't do, and how can they put in place. So rather than total isolation, just thinking about Zoom, how can they tap into Zoom? How can they? One of the things we missed was accidental affirmation. For example, people were starting to feel quite low, and we weren't. If you're in an office or a practice, and you walk in one day and you're wearing a particularly nice top, a shirt or a blouse or a shirt, and somebody will say to you, "That was brilliant," or somebody says to you, "Oh, the way you dealt with that patient, that was a really difficult situation. That was brilliant," and then they're out of your way again. So it's positive affirmation, but it's accidental positive affirmation. And when that depletes too far, we end up with our resources is that we then can turn inwards a little bit, and we kind of go, "Oh, I can't do this. I'm not." I'm not, because you haven't had the pats that help us to feel strong and confident. And at some stage, to a lesser or greater extent, depending who are, will feel a bit depleted. So one of the things I say to people going back into lockdown again, if we go back to this, think, where can you get your affirmation? Yeah. So you think about, what are the Zooms at work? And some people thought quizzes were great. Most people got fed up with quizzes towards the end, and because quizzes were great to see each other, but there was not great connections going on. No. So think, well, I need to make a connection. Therefore, I'm going to highlight 3 people that I'm going to talk to 3 times a week. Yeah. So we have a bit more idea of what we can do, knowing what we might have to face. Yeah.
And would you say that with some of the people, and again, I'm sort of like pulling you back to people that you've worked with, but I mean, over the years, so not just COVID focused, has it been hard sometimes to keep people focused, when you're giving them the tools to help themselves or to help them in the work? Do you find some characters difficult to keep focused and in the room, if you like?
You don't want names, do you?
Well, we can. Let me get a pen. Hang on.
Something? That's an interesting question. I'll tell you why. When I'm running a leadership training program, I often try and encourage them to use a really good psychometric instrument. So there was a program I ran, and it's over the last 2 years. And I've been meeting with this group once every 8 weeks-ish. But the very first thing we did was use a psychometric instrument, which highlighted what you were, just the whole personality, your types, what you were great at, what your behaviors were, what your learning styles were, how you interacted with others. So there's a couple of fantastic tools out there. And what that does is it will highlight there are some people who focus really well, and there are other people who will not focus. But there's two sides to every coin. So those people who have got fantastic outgoing personalities, you might find that their eye for detail is not great. And the people who've got an eye for detail, you might find that they're not good with spontaneity. And so that allows you to be able, not me, you, but in the leadership training program to identify where my strengths are and what I need to work at. And by using that tool, it's not my observation, it's the tool has said it about the person. And without exception, everybody agrees with it. Without a couple of areas which might not be right, because they're all quite different, we have got certain aspects of personality which we can be fairly general about.
Yeah.
Not the minutiae, but certain aspects of personality, which is quite a powerful tool to use to try and help address what you were just asking there.
Yeah. So I mean, every day for you, training wise, with different teams, I appreciate you work with the team throughout a year. I know it's not just one course, so really you could have a real mixed bunch. Really, no one day would be the same for you.
I do. I was thinking this. I was thinking. The range. One of the things I love about my job is I've had the privilege of meeting such a variety of people, or a serious variety of people. I've worked with Buckingham Palace, the royal household.
I was going to ask you about this actually, Pearse, because I've seen some of the people you work with, and I'd love you to share it with us.
So I've gone into the palace, and I have worked with people within the palace. I have walked down the James Bond corridor. Okay, so and it's a completely different world. And I was allowed to become part of that. I mean, what a brilliant job that is!
And look at the smile it's putting on your face.
Yeah, and they were, a truly great group of people to work with. And then you go into, I have done work with some government bodies and probably I shouldn't talk about, but and they're completely, and again another great group of people. But English National Ballet is a client I was working with last year quite considerably. And with the English National Ballet, you've got all the creativity that comes along with it. Associated Board of the Royal Schools of Music, again, a hugely creative. So you've got, so you've got creative. You couldn't get much more established than Buckingham Palace and the Royal Household. I mean, it's just so. I was doing a management program, and I was kind of looking through my notes to see what I could use, what I couldn't use. And there's a part of, I like to say that everybody's got to be managed. Both your manager's got to be managed and your team has got to be managed. Buckingham Palace was a bit different because once you get to a certain level, there was only one manager above. I'm not sure that she would be quite as easy. So it was a fantastic, it was just, no, maybe not this organization. So what that shows me, or told me, or I knew, is that one size doesn't fit all. Every program I've developed has been for that organization. And that organization only, absolutely bespoke. And because every organization functions in a completely different way. But the one commonality is that we are all fairly much the same. We all have great hopes. We've all got great desires. We all have self-doubt. We all want to do something better. We all want to learn. If you look at all the positives there. So it's and so then with that, no matter where you are, you will and tap into that. It will be a consistency amongst no matter what client you go into. So.
What's the sort of the biggest positive for you that you've had throughout the past sort of 6 months, do you think? Well, apart from your marriage. Your wedding.
Well saved, Carl.
Yeah.
You're talking from a professional point of view, of course.
I am. Yeah.
It's an interesting one. I'm trying to think actually, because some of the things I was working with, I at this stage it's hard to mention names actually because it would be a bit unfair.
Yeah.
I find a challenge. I was just working with one senior team, and it was a team that wasn't getting on terribly well. And you're trying to use ways to help, because if I go in and started banging a drum, the tendency would be that if somebody did that with me, I would get defensive. I will justify my position. I will say why it was. So the hardest thing to do for me, the most challenging thing is to make sure I don't go in and try and the defensiveness drops down. But I was working with one huge team who were hugely defensive, and they weren't working well together. They were quite divisive. And I suppose one of the greatest achievements was when the light bulb moment started to happen, and everybody and the people within the team started to realize their contribution to the system. And I love the whole idea of the idea that we're all a part of a system. I mean, families are a system. Families operate in a certain way that develops from when two people get together, and then a child comes along, and then a second child goes, and that system is their system. So the systemic approach to any group of people is fascinating to me. Any organization has their system, which is unique to that group. So this particular group had to understand their system and their contribution to it, and that it wasn't somebody else's responsibility. And when those light bulbs moments start happening, let me tell you, it was tough. It was a tough process.
Imagine. Yeah.
But when they got there and they started to look at what they needed to do in order to contribute to a system which might be a bit less damaging, that was one of the moments which you think, yes.
Oh, good. Good. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you say that families have a system, because it just reminded me of a story of my gran, bless her. She had gone, she was pretty much blind at this point, and she was living in a care home, sort of self-sufficient care home. So it was a very good care home. So my brother used to go around there and drop off the groceries and things like that. And for whatever reason, I'd got involved with work, and I was very busy doing courses, and I hadn't really been sort of in her life as much as I was when I was younger. Yeah. And, you know, various family members had passed away, and we just hadn't had a great deal of contact. But I went round there with my brother, and he said, "Oh, Carl's here, Grandma, Carl's here." And she went, "Yeah, he's back in the family." I'd never left. You know, I'm back into that routine, that system that she's got in here. Yeah. You know, he's back in the family.
I love that.
But it was this mafia kind of saying coming out.
It didn't sound like the mafia.
Yeah. He's back in our system. But yeah, we do have that, because her, and I'm sorry, I'm chatting away, but her side of that family, my father's side of the family, very different to my mother's side of the family. Yeah. Mother's side of the family, it was very open, very chaotic, very cuddly and everything like that. My father's side of the family, very formal. Elbows not on the table. If you touch the walls, you got smacked. You sat at the table until you'd finished your food. If there was a spoon there, you knew that you were getting pudding. But all the cream went to my granddad first, and then whereas at my grand's house, it was a free for all. On my mother's side. Yeah. So very, very different systems, and adapting. My parents got divorced, and getting into those different systems was great fun, I must admit. Sorry.
No, go on, Reds. I'm go on.
Yeah, and I mean, I love the things that you're talking about, the tools, the positivity, and controlling, trying to take back that. I mean, it's very difficult sometimes, isn't it, when we flip into that animal kind of instinctive things. I think it's really difficult sometimes to realize that you're there, and then having the tools to take back control. It takes a bit of training. It's a learning process. Yeah. I think it's a strong learning process, because I've been through quite a few things that, I mean, we could talk. This is supposed to be bite size, but I've been listening away. There's so many questions I want to ask. There's so much more. Yeah, that
Carlos, part one.
Yes, great, good. I like that.
That is right.
That's fantastic. I'm really pleased to hear that.
One thing I do find interesting is people find comfort in different ways, clearly. So whether that is around family, they have their systems you're talking about now, and routine. The word routine to me is really interesting, because routine could be different for me, for yourself, Pearse, and for you, Carl. And when somebody says, "Well, I don't have a routine," and I go, "Oh, you don't know? So what do you do when you get up in the morning?" And so they'll go, "Well, I get out of bed and I have a cup of tea first before I clean my teeth." And I go, "You've got a routine straight away." Yeah. But I think people's perception of routine's different. Yeah. But I actually think routine for folk, a lot of folk, they find it as a comfort, like I say, in some shape or form.
Absolutely. I mean, routine was one of the first after the fear, routine, because when furlough happened, I was asked to do a series of videos to the furloughed staff. And the first thing we talked about was routine, and the importance of routine, and then routine and purpose was led on from that. And actually, I think it's really funny, is that when somebody says, "Oh, I don't have a routine," and there's a degree whereby you go, "I'm a free spirit. I can do as I want to. I've got free will. I've got control." And yes, that's all very true. However, as you rightly say, we have got the most unbelievable routine. It's just that some, maybe a bit like your father, Carl's side of the family, maybe a little bit more, substantial.
Yeah.
And then there are others which are a bit more fluid, but deep down there'll be some element of routine as well. And in routine is such an important thing to do in terms of for our well-being, for goodness sake, is that at the start of lockdown, you may have done this yourself, and certainly anybody who might listen to this there'll be people identify, you think, well, I don't need to go to bed at 11 tonight. I'm going to go to bed at 12. And then I go to bed and I'm going to stay up and watch another episode of Hollywood, or I'm going to just, and you sit and watch another one. And then you get up a little bit later and everything starts to slip. And we have a circadian rhythm. As we function and our bodies respond, and it responds to daylight, it responds to our waking hours, and our bodies will work in a certain way. Our rhythm is also our body's function. You know this from your training, is your body's function. Our bodies do different things at different times of the day, and it's necessary that they do those functions to keep ourselves healthy, without going into too much detail. So to get up at a regular time and go to bed at a regular time is really important. The novelty of not having to do that is brilliant. But and it's all right for a little while when we're on holiday and we can sleep during the day. But if we're trying to hold a job down and we're trying to do responsible things like homeschooling the kids as it was, and all the other things that we were trying to do, then routine is really so very, very important, and even not outside of lockdown too.
Yeah, I'm funnily enough, yeah, I'm kind of like you're both saying. I notice in myself that I've got this conflict from my parents, obviously, where I've got this non-routine, free-spirited kind of person arguing with the routine. But I always found, I mean, we went on holiday recently, and you mentioned that about the lapse in the routine, but I was up early, going for a run, like I do when I'm here, and then I'd come back, get breakfast ready, and these guys still fast asleep, having their holiday lie-ins. But for me, I'm not like, I like to stick to what I know, and I know that I like to get up early and do this. I don't like to lie in.
It's also important to recognize that not everybody will recognize that.
Yeah.
And you said earlier on but how do you realize? You're asking is when do you become aware of your behavior?
Yeah.
And one of the things that's really important to know is what our triggers are. It really is what makes us behave in a negative or a positive way. So let's look at the negative. It could be the trigger would be lack of sleep. So lack of sleep stops me. It gets me. I start not being able to think the same way as I would like to. I get more negative thoughts. I miss having the ability to solve problems. But knowing the trigger is lack of sleep is a self-awareness, and so therefore it's. The more we know about how we function and what our triggers are, the healthier we are as well. And understanding that there is sometimes there is I love the idea of the creative and order in your head going on as well, and just trying to find a balance that you can take the two. And I think that's also. I also think it's a never-ending study in ourselves.
Yeah. I wonder if people look, and I don't know if this is a question of things, but I wonder when people, when they're listening to this, and I imagine they're going to identify with so much that you're saying. I wonder if people look out there for answers and solutions when they should be looking in here and starting in here first, if that makes sense. Like you've just said. I don't know, you're grouchy, you're this, that, and the other. Well, you had a late night last night, so it's nothing out there that's contributing. You had a late night last night, therefore. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's an interesting one. It's a huge discussion actually as well about how sometimes it's easier to pass comment out there than to pass comment on in here. So, for example, I don't know. next door were having a party until 2 o'clock last night, and that was ridiculous. And actually, last week I had a party until 2 o'clock. Sometimes how it's easier to project outside of yourself. One of the things that's really useful from what I do is when I do coaching, and I also trained as I did my postgrad was counseling psychology. So I focused so a lot of it's about how to actually being told a story, for example, and whereby you're projecting out, is having a coach to actually say, well, what is that saying about you then? And being able to bring it back into the room again in a really safe way. Because when sometimes it's safer to look at somebody else, because it can be it can be so hard to look at what I do, because it can unravel something sometimes. Yeah. So it's about finding that a place and a platform to do that is safe for the other person for that person to look at themselves. And that can take time. That's not a simple. Sometimes it can be a very simple process, depending on the situation and the person. But other times it can be a massively complicated process, which just takes time and patience.
Yes, patience. I'd imagine it would.
Have you found sort of it more of a struggle trying to help some of the people that you're working with the restrictions that we've got since March, and you can see that there are problems with some of the individuals that are asking you to help them. Yeah. But have you found it difficult to kind of, rather than I'm assuming normally what you do is you'd go over, you'd pay a visit, you'd have that contact, face-to-face contact. Have you found that a lot more difficult with the Zoom meetings, not necessarily the technology, but actually whether or not you're able to interact and the outcomes are similar, or have you found the outcomes sort of slightly more restrictive, or is it something you can't measure?
I'm going to shock. I'm going to shock myself with this answer. I would have been shocked. I would have said I always turn down online or virtual coaching. Always. I always said no. I have to do it face to face.
Yeah.
I've completely revised that.
Wow.
Is that after a while we don't even know we're not in the same room. Now there's certain cues I'm going to miss. For example, I can just see your heads and shoulders, and so there's other body language and how we interpret behavior and what is being said to us is done in a whole cluster of observations. So my observations are very limited. So I do take that one on and say, so we have to allow that I'm not seeing everything. But my experience is that within a minute, when you are involved so much talking about the person is talking about themselves, and that is the focus of attention, we forget that we're not in the same room together. That's the feedback I'm getting overwhelmingly as well. And I'm shocked. Seriously, I shocked myself. I would not, in February, I would not have said that. And actually, it makes me think, in some ways, it's nearly easier. It's nearly more comfortable. And we've now got to a stage where people have got easy with. They don't have to feel they're looking at the screen all the time. They're looking and they're talking, and they're maybe talking off camera. But the intensity has gone as well, which we had at the very beginning as well, which is very interesting. It's not perfect. I'm sure it's not perfect. I'm sure that it will evolve to be used in conjunction with face-to-face. But at the moment, I have to say that it is working very well.
Do you know, that's interesting, because you've just triggered a thought in my head. It's not something that I do, but it's certainly something that, and Kelly won't mind me saying it, but she certainly relates to celebrities on TV.
Yeah.
That we have no perception of, no understanding of who they are, yet we feel their lives sometimes when we see it in the press and things like that. But I've got no idea, of Brad Pitt and what he goes through or anything like that. But apparently he's got some new girlfriend, and it's all being discussed on Loose Women, and and has he got a type and all this sort of stuff. And for me, that baffles me a little bit, because I think I don't know the person. But I wonder if it's that digital relationship and just there is something between the camera and the way our psychology works that we allow. There's some I don't know. It's getting a bit deep for me, but there's some kind of subconscious connection that we take.
I think there's going to come out of a lot of this. I think there's going to be a whole realm of research, a whole area of research that we've not considered. So anybody who's doing PhDs or doing there's a whole area now which we've got information about, which we didn't have information before, and what the knock-on effect of that. And I think you're right. We do join the dots up. Yeah. We make judgments all the time. Every moment of every day, we make judgments on somebody, and we see a collection of behaviors, and we make some judgment. It's called the ladder of inference. Just if you want to go, is that I see something, it triggers something in my head, and it's based on what I've seen before and what I've judged before and what I've experienced, and I make a judgment, and I respond in a certain way. I react in a certain way. Carl, you were talking earlier on about responding and reacting. Sometimes you just absolutely, you've gone into, it's when you start to talk about the triggers and you react. The whole idea about our understanding of our behavior is that you may not be able to change your total reaction, in that you may begin to go, and then you, in your head, you've gone, I've now understood, I'm about to do X. That's a reaction which I don't want to do. I've learned a coping mechanism for that. I pull back, and it may be to say to somebody, sorry, I need to hold myself a second. Give me a second just to try gather my thoughts, or give me a moment until I think what I'm going to do, or I was going to do this, but I'm just going to do something different. So it could be you're quite vocal about the response that you want to make, but you can't sometimes change even you just may go to do it, but even stopping it mid-action is you've improved the response that you're going to do. That makes sense.
It does make sense. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I'm a very I mean, I know that I'm a very different person from the person that I was certainly 6 months ago and a year ago, and I think that I'm always trying to improve. And I used to be very different. I speak to my friends and we talk about some of the things that when we lived together, and how reactionary I was then compared to how calmer I am now.
Good. And make a little, every so often, make a little list.
See, I'm not very good at that. I should do that.
Make a little list and say, this is what, because our behavior becomes second nature very quickly. So what we learned to do today, in 6 months' time, we forget that we couldn't do that 7 months ago. And it's a really useful thing just to say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I've learned. Or even just anybody's watched this, what have I learned from lockdown? And I gathered a crowd of people. Actually, I'll tell you what, I've got lots of nephews and nieces. And I gathered 20 of, I've got 20. So I sent an invitation out at 9 o'clock one morning, said, I need a trial of Zoom. I'm about to run a training session. I've never run it before. Who's up for a trial of Zoom? And within an hour, 15 of them come through. So I did this at Zoom with 15. So number one, it was brilliant to have them all in one room and talk to them and see them. And it was just fantastic. It was a magical moment. And then I gave them a task, right? And I rather than going how awful life is and talking about, because that's what they went into break. I wanted them to go to breakout rooms and try that and come back in and all that maneuvering. And the first task they were given is, what's the upside of lockdown? What is the silver lining of lockdown? And without exception, every one of them came back with a really amazing, powerful, positive. And that's the power of positive psychology.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And lots of folk are saying it's brought families together. Priority, even young children are saying, that they see parents more because parents were working at home, or I must admit, I can't recall. I've got a lot of sort of godchildren as well as young children with my friends, and I haven't heard any negative feedback from any young child. I must admit. I don't know if I would have said friends. I know they miss their friends, but social media, there were other ways they could interact with them. But I've got to say, I never heard anything negative from kids. I thought it was lovely. We could learn a bit or two.
But it's intriguing. It's intriguing. So that's why we say we could learn something. What we could learn is what I was saying there was just, is at the end of the day, or at some stage, just say, what have I learned here? How am I a different person now than I would have been 5 or 6 months ago? What does it talk? And honestly, it'll take 10 minutes max, for you just to have a think. But it's an interesting affirmation. It is.
Very much so. I mean, Pearse, we could go on all night, and I mean, seriously, I'm going to get another glass of water.
You're going to eat.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I mean, we, without a shadow of a doubt, and when I say we, I mean us and the audience out there, I know that we're going to be biting at the bit to get you back, if you'd be kind enough to join us.
Absolutely lovely.
But go on, please.
No, I was just saying that one of the things that we're doing also is trying to do small little bite-sized podcasts, because they're very, I think that is really, our world is changing rapidly, day by day by day by day. And I think just if we can day by day by day, just get a handle on doing something, or having an objective or a behavior that we want to try and amend or do or be better at, then it's such a better place for us all, really.
100%.
We'll get you on Oral Bites. That's our little podcast. Yeah.
Have you got, seriously, have you?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, we've got, yeah. For anybody that's listening, Oral Bites.
I like the name. It's very good.
Thanks.
Yes. I'm sorry that I didn't come up with that one. Oh.
The idea, you could change it. You could have Oral Bites, so you spell it as in hearing the bite. But the idea was we had little conversations and little 15-minute snippets, but it's actually turned out that we have these hour-long like tonight, exactly like tonight. So I can convert this, but yes, it's been great.
It's great. It's lovely. It's
likewise.
You're so on receive for it, so it's a lovely discussion and chat to have.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you.
I mean, on that note, I'm going to thank you both very, very much for this evening. And
that's gone quick, hasn't it? That's gone quick.
It has. I know. Look at that time. We knew it would do.
I thought about 20 minutes had gone there. So.
I know. It's unbelievable, isn't it? They say life is short.
It is, life is short. It is. Time flies when you're enjoying yourself. How many more can you?
So, on that note, everybody, we hope you have a lovely weekend. Enjoy the sunshine while it lasts. And as I say, Pearse, you've heard it here and live that he will be joining us again. So we'll look forward to it. So good evening, guys.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you. Cheers.
Bye-bye.